If I had walked in 10 minutes later, everything might have survived. Alara Wynne replayed that thought 100 times. 10 minutes. That was the window between legacy and humiliation, peace and sabotage, becoming and being buried. She stood still behind the crimson curtain, hands trembling slightly, heart racing. Beneath a gown she bought second-hand, but stitched with her own gold thread. The spotlight waited. The wine was chilled. The press cameras were already flashing outside. Her first solo art exhibition. 100 pieces. 2 years of unpaid work. Dozens of nights with clay under her nails and acrylics on her skin. And only one thing could unravel it all. Celine Sylvester. And Celine had already walked in. Alara heard her voice before she saw her. Smooth, icy, deliberate. Greeting guests like she owned the walls. Smiling at critics she never invited. Whispering sharp words that Alara couldn't hear, but felt. Even from backstage, she gripped the curtain tighter. If the fabric had a pulse, it would have matched hers. This was supposed to be a night of celebration. Instead, it felt like an ambush. Cassian was late. Her husband, the one who had surprised her with the gallery space. The man who whispered, "You deserve the world," while buttoning his shirt. Who said, "Ignore my mother. You don't have to impress her." But he didn't say that loud enough when Celine looked Alara up and down in front of 300 guests at their wedding. And he wasn't here now. Celine was. Celine, who ran galleries across Manhattan, who once told Alara at brunch, "Marriage is no sandbox. You'll have to earn the last name." Celine, who smiled like a hostess and cut like a scalpel. She wasn't on the invite list. She came anyway. Let me ask you this. Have you ever stood on the edge of your dream, only to feel someone quietly pushing you off? Maybe you've been the one who worked twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. Or maybe you've been underestimated, not because of your talent, but because of your silence. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your biggest moment was hijacked by someone who hated you quietly? Because this wasn't just sabotage, it was a message. The clock struck 6:01 p.m. The doors opened. The crowd entered, and for the first time, Alara didn't feel like the artist. She felt like the exhibit. Watched, measured, judged. A well-known critic from New York Aesthetic leaned into Celine's ear and pointed at one of the larger canvases, Thread Between Us, a piece Alara had bled for emotionally. Celine smiled lightly, then said the words that would follow Alara for years. "It's sweet. She'll grow out of this phase." It was deliberate. She said it loudly enough for the people behind her to hear, quiet enough to pretend she didn't. The critic's brows lifted. Someone in the back murmured, "Didn't her husband fund this?" Another guest, glass of rose in hand, asked, "Is she self-taught?" Celine turned and replied smoothly, "Aren't they all these days?" Alara stepped out from behind the curtain at 6:10 p.m. She didn't look at Celine. She walked to her first piece, greeted the museum's CO curator, smiled, and shook a few hands. But inside, she was holding back an emotional landslide. Cassian still hadn't shown up. She texted once, no reply. She checked the time. Her phone, the entrance, nothing. At 7:03 p.m., as the crowd grew and the buzz intensified, she turned to greet an investor and heard it. Crash, west wall, the gravity of silence. Her centerpiece sculpture, clay, steel, bronze, months of physical pain. Her body literally bore the scar from welding its base. It lay in shards across the marble floor. Gasps echoed. Someone yelled for a broom. A museum assistant apologized, wide-eyed and red-faced. I slipped," she said. She wasn't on Alara's staff. She worked for Celine, and the smirk she tried to hide made Alara's blood run cold. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't say a word. She simply stared. The assistant walked away, and the crowd went quiet for just a second, long enough for Alara to hear her own heart thudding in her ears. This wasn't an accident. It was a performance, and Alara wasn't the star. She was the sacrifice. Cassian walked in at 7:42 p.m., tie loose, jaw tight. He kissed her cheek. "I'm sorry." Traffic was insane. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. Her sculpture was gone. Her guests were whispering. The critics were writing. And his mother had won. That night, she didn't stay for the closing toast. She didn't answer questions from the press. She packed her bags, one by one. Paintbrushes, folders, business cards, unsold pieces. By 3:12 a.m., the gallery was empty. Except for her. When someone you love doesn't protect you, something inside shifts. Quietly, permanently. The next morning, Cassian made coffee like it was just another day. "She's harsh," he said about Celine, "but she's still my mother. Don't let her get under your skin." Elara didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw a plate or walk out. She looked up from her cup and asked, "Did you ever ask her to stop?" Cassian blinked, didn't answer. They slept back to back that night. And when the sun came up, Elara didn't reach for her brushes. She reached for herself. By the third morning after the gallery opening, Elara's world looked the same, but felt unrecognizable. The apartment was clean. Her brushes were untouched. Her canvas sat untouched beneath its white cloth. The fridge hummed. Cassian left early, like always. But everything inside her had shifted. She didn't eat much. She didn't cry either. She was watching herself from outside her own skin. Elara had always been composed, observant. Quiet didn't mean weak, not for her. But this kind of quiet, this kind wasn't about control. It was grief. Grief for the version of herself who had believed in that night. Grief for the art she'd lost to whispers, wine, and a shattered sculpture. Grief for thinking someone she loved would shield her. Cassian didn't bring up the exhibit again. He kissed her shoulder before heading out, told her to keep painting, and texted once or twice during the day. But never once asked, "Are you okay?" He assumed she was. She wasn't. That Friday, Celine sent an orchid arrangement. No note. Just a white ribbon around the stem. It stayed in the trash. Over the next few weeks, Elara slowly detached. She stopped talking during dinner, stopped offering her opinions. When Cassian asked what she thought of a new campaign his firm was working on, she just nodded and said, "Looks fine." When he mentioned a new restaurant opening in Soho, she said, "You should go." He didn't notice that she never said "we" anymore. Or maybe he did, and didn't care enough to ask why. Every day, Elara sat in her old studio and stared at the blank canvas. And every day, she left without touching it. It took 1 month for her hand to twitch again. Not toward a brush, toward a notepad. She scribbled a shape, a single line, then another. It turned into a sketch, then two, then an image. Still no color, still no paint, but something cracked, not broken, just opened. She realized something painful and freeing. She had tied her identity to someone who let her fall when it counted, and that meant she could untie it. Cassian wasn't cruel. He wasn't abusive. But he was absent, neutral, passive in all the moments that called for fire. He told her once, "You're the calmest person I know." But Elara didn't want calm anymore. She wanted power, her own. That winter, she began visiting Harlem. Quietly. She found a small studio on 138th Street above a shuttered bookstore. Dusty windows, wood floors. The rent was half what she expected. The landlord said, "Artists like to cry in this one. Must be the ghosts." Elara smiled for the first time in months. She signed the lease. She told Cassian it was for storage. He didn't question it. She moved in a single easel. Then her paint, then her sketchbooks. No one followed her. No press, no Celine. No whispers, just space and silence, the kind that gave back, not took away. In that studio, she painted until her hands blistered. Then kept painting. She didn't post on social media, didn't invite friends, didn't sell a single piece. For 2 full years, she created for no one but herself. Sometimes, she wondered if Cassian thought she'd given up. Maybe he did. He never asked to see what she was working on, never asked if she was still trying. He probably assumed she'd burned out, stopped believing, stopped dreaming. He had no idea she was becoming the best version of herself in a room he never visited. One day she wrapped 3 of her pieces in brown canvas and shipped them under a pseudonym to a mid-tier curator in Madrid. She used her grandmother's maiden name. 6 weeks later, she got a reply. All 3 were accepted. 4 months later, her entire first collection sold for $280,000. She didn't tell Cassian. She didn't tell anyone. She just wired the funds into an account in her own name. That same night, Cassian asked if she wanted to go to dinner with a few of his clients. She said she had a meeting. Ilara wasn't vengeful. She wasn't bitter, but she was awake now. And once you wake up in your own power, going back to sleep is impossible. Celine hadn't reached out in nearly a year, but Ilara knew women like her didn't stop until they believed you were no longer a threat. Celine probably assumed she'd ruined her permanently. She probably bragged about it behind closed doors. What Celine didn't know was that Ilara had learned how to disappear. And sometimes, disappearing is the most dangerous thing you can do. Because when you return, you're no longer begging for space. You're choosing where to stand, and who you let stand near you. Ilara returned to Harlem the next morning, opened the blinds, sat in front of her newest canvas, and smiled. She hadn't been erased. She was preparing to be undeniable. Long before Ilara ever met Cassian Sylvester, she had already learned how to be quiet in a world that didn't reward it. She grew up in a little town nestled between 2 hills where the loudest thing most evenings was the river after rain. Her father worked at a feed store. Her mother taught music at the local elementary school. Their home was small, tidy, and gentle. That's how Ilara learned to move through life, gently, with grace, with care, never taking more space than she was given. But her notebooks? They were bold. In 3rd grade, her teacher sent home a note. Your daughter has an unusual way of seeing the world. She had drawn her backyard, not as it looked, but as it felt. Her trees weren't green. They were streaks of blue and orange. Her sky had no sun, just gold smudges and charcoal wings. Her mother framed that piece. Her father called it weird, but good. She started painting at 11. By 15, she was experimenting with texture, pressing dried leaves, linen, even her own hair into wet acrylics. Her work didn't win school contests, but local shop owners began asking to hang her canvases near their windows. At 17, she had her first exhibit, in the corner of a bookstore next to the poetry shelf. No one bought anything, but she remembered one older man who stood there for 20 minutes just staring at a canvas titled Held Breath. "You made that?" he asked. She nodded. It made me feel like someone understood. That was the moment she decided if her work could make one person feel less alone, it mattered. College wasn't in the budget. She left home at 19, waited tables in 3 cities, slept in friends' basements, once even in her own car for a week. But she never stopped painting. Coffee shops, subway halls, flea markets. She sold art where she could for whatever price people offered. She didn't want riches. She wanted space, quiet, a place where no one looked at her like she had to explain herself. At 24, she was working as a temp receptionist at a downtown design firm and waiting tables at night in a bistro near the East River. That's when she met Cassian. He wasn't like the other men who flirted or condescended. He walked in wearing a slate grey suit and a tired look, like someone who lived in boardrooms but had left his soul behind somewhere quieter. She spilled his coffee. He didn't snap. He smiled, then looked behind her, at a canvas titled Thread Between Us. "You painted that?" he asked. She nodded, embarrassed. He pulled a card from his pocket and said, "Let me know if you ever want to talk about where that came from." She thought he was joking. But later that night, she Googled him. Cassian Sylvester, venture capital executive, CEO of a private fund, known for buying companies, turning them profitable, and never losing control. She didn't call him. 2 weeks later, he came back in. "I was hoping you'd hang something new," he said. "I did," she replied. He walked over to the new piece, studied it, then sat in the same booth for 2 hours and watched people's reactions. That night, he left a tip double his bill and a note that read, "This piece demands silence." That's rare. 3 months later, they were meeting for quiet dinners. 6 months later, he was spending more time at her apartment than his penthouse. A year later, they were married. There was no dramatic proposal, no staged moment with cameras and diamonds. Just a quiet car ride one night, a red light, rain on the windshield, and his voice saying, "Marry me." Elara didn't say yes right away. She asked, "Are you offering me a home or a title?" Cassian replied, "Whichever you need most." That should have been her first red flag, but she chose to believe it meant both. The wedding was elegant and small. A rooftop venue, 50 guests, mostly his colleagues, a few of her old friends, and the press that followed him everywhere. Celine Sylvester arrived in pearls and diamonds. She walked past Elara like they'd never met. When Cassian introduced them, Celine smiled and said, "Sweet girl, you have strong hands for a painter. I hope marriage doesn't soften them." Elara smiled back. But deep inside she understood. This woman wasn't curious. She was calculating. The next few months were quiet, mostly. Cassian worked long hours. Elara painted in a room that doubled as her studio. They shared takeout meals, long silences, and occasional laughter. Celine called only when she needed something. And please reply, a donation, a press connection. Never just to check in. Elara never pushed. She knew what art required, stillness, not war. But slowly, little things started to chip at her. Family dinners where Celine would say, "Cassian, have you seen the new Fraser exhibit?" And then add, "Real artists, not those street pieces." Or when she gave Elara a book titled "Turning Hobbies into Structure," with a note, "For when you're ready to think long-term." Cassian never spoke up, never corrected her, never pulled his mother aside and said, "Enough." Elara began to wonder if he noticed at all, or if her pain was part of the price of entry. Then one night, he came home with a folder, laid it on the table like a gift. "Gallery space," he said. "It's yours. No strings, full funding, name on the door." Elara stared at the documents. It was real. He had pulled favors, found investors, arranged everything. It should have been a moment of celebration. But her hands trembled. Because she didn't ask for this through him. She wanted to earn it. Still, she smiled, thanked him, let him hug her. In the mirror later that night, she whispered, "You're going to make this your own. Not his, not hers, yours." She stayed up past 2 a.m. sketching floor layouts. She designed the exhibit down to every last inch. Color theory, lighting, flow. Each piece told a story, not just of pain, but of becoming, of what it means to survive love, loss, rejection, and resurrection. Cassian nodded when she explained her vision. Celine never asked. 2 months before opening night, Celine invited Elara to brunch. Just the two of them. They met at a high-rise restaurant with windows as wide as Celine's ego. Celine ordered a dry salad and wine. Elara stuck with coffee. Halfway through, Celine set her fork down and said, "Art is sweet, but marriage isn't a sandbox. You'll have to choose eventually. Fantasy or function." Elara didn't flinch. She simply said, "Some people build empires from sand." Celine smiled without warmth. Not in Manhattan. Elara paid the bill. And from that moment on, she stopped trying to be understood by the woman who only saw her as an accessory. What Celine didn't realize was this. Elara didn't need her validation. She needed her silence. And Celine couldn't give her that. The gallery was her dream, but it came wrapped in Cassian's name. The lease, handled by his legal team. The lighting crew, referred by his friend from development. The wine vendor, Cassian's favorite from his company's last IPO celebration. The press list, a blend of art critics and corporate donors who didn't know the difference between oils and acrylics. Elara wanted to be grateful. She forced herself to be. But as she walked through the half-lit space 2 weeks before the opening, she felt something she hadn't expected. Displacement. It was hers, but not on her terms. The curator assigned to her show kept calling it Mrs. Sylvester's debut instead of Elara Wynn's. And on every print proof for the invitation cards, her bio was shortened, condensed, stripped of her story. At home, she tried to talk to Cassian. "Why does it feel like this isn't mine?" she asked one night while flipping through promotional mock-ups. He looked up from his laptop and said, "We're giving you a head start. That's what support looks like." She replied, "Support isn't control." He smiled. "No one's controlling anything. You've got the whole place to yourself." But that wasn't the point. She had space, but not independence. She had a platform, but no voice in who was invited onto it. Celine hadn't visited the gallery once during setup, not once, but her influence lingered, like perfume in a room she never stepped into. Elara overheard one assistant say, "We need to make sure Mrs. Sylvester's mother-in-law is seated near the mayor's aide. She's expecting it." Another replied, "She wants all the major press outlets facing the central sculpture at 7 p.m. Elara hadn't approved that timing, or that layout, but she wasn't asked. "And Cassian?" He kept saying, "Don't worry, everything's under control." That phrase became a siren in Elara's head. Under control? Under whose control? Because the deeper she went into planning, the less of herself she saw reflected in the event. Even the lighting scheme was adjusted by someone else, after Celine offered a few suggestions to the gallery's board. The night before opening, Elara stayed late at the gallery, alone. The space was still. Her pieces hung exactly where she'd placed them, even if the spotlights had been shifted. She stood in front of Gravity of Silence, the sculpture that would later be shattered. It was metal and weight and shape, like all the things she carried but didn't speak. It took her 5 weeks to weld, 3 burns, 1 minor electrical shock. But she'd never been prouder of a piece. It stood tall at the west wall, right near where Celine's seat was placed. Elara sat on the floor, back against the column, knees pulled to her chest. She didn't cry. She thought she might. But instead, she sat in quiet defiance, the same stillness that had defined her entire life. She remembered the look on Celine's face at the wedding. Calm, smug, knowing. That same look would walk into her gallery tomorrow, not to celebrate, but to remind her, this was never really yours. Cassian called around 11:30 p.m. She didn't pick up. He texted, "Don't stay too late. Big day tomorrow." No mention of how she felt. No question about her heart. No reassurance that she was being seen. He thought he was supporting her. But support without awareness isn't love. It's logistics. Back home, she couldn't sleep. She tried sketching, then cleaning, then scrolling through old photos of her first flea market sale, of her studio when it was still just a rented corner in a shared basement, of a customer crying when they saw a piece Elara titled, "What Forgiveness Looks Like." She missed that girl, the one who made art for survival, not performance, the one who didn't need velvet ropes or wine bars. By morning, the knot in her stomach hadn't loosened. She showered, dressed, packed her tote bag with everything she might need, an emergency touch, up kit, a backup guest list, even her own lighting adjustment notes. When Cassian saw her at the door, he smiled like a man proud of his trophy. "You're going to crush this," he said, cupping her cheek. She leaned into it for half a second, then pulled away, not coldly, but carefully. They drove separately. He said he had a meeting first. Elara arrived at the gallery an hour before the doors opened. Everything was ready, perfect, or so it seemed, until Celine walked in, uninvited, early, wearing white, not ivory, not cream, white. At an art gallery opening where Elara was wearing a hand-stitched ivory jumpsuit, designed to reflect the tones of her lead sculpture, Celine's heels clicked on the floor like a countdown. Every movement was intentional. She greeted the press before greeting Elara. She approached a critic from New York Aesthetic, and whispered in his ear. Ilara couldn't hear the words, but she saw the critic look toward her and smirk, then write something down. Celine looked around like she owned the air inside the room. And in a way, she did. Because everyone in the space treated her like she was the main event. They all knew who she was. The real power. The woman who allowed this to happen. When Celine reached Ilara, she didn't offer congratulations. She tilted her head, scanned the room, then said, very earnest, "It'll play well in Europe." Then she turned and walked away before Ilara could respond. No one saw the way Ilara's fingers curled into her palm. No one felt the restraint it took to stay composed. No one heard the scream she didn't release. Because Ilara wasn't raised to fight fire with fire. She was taught to wait, to endure, to observe, and then to become unstoppable. The guests kept coming, the wine kept flowing, and Ilara stood there, holding her breath, until 6:01 p.m., when the exhibit officially began. 6:01 p.m., the doors opened. The gallery flooded with guests. Flashbulbs clicked. Voices echoed through the space she had poured her soul into. At first it felt like a wave, unstoppable, loud, and swallowing. Ilara stood still, one step behind the welcome table, lips curved in a gentle smile. Internally she was reviewing every piece, how the lights hit, where people were standing, how her sculptures breathed in this curated chaos. But then she saw it. Celine had set up camp near the central sculpture, Gravity of Silence, the one Ilara had placed intentionally by the west wall so guests would pause and reflect. That sculpture was her spine, the one piece she felt held her entire journey. Now, it stood surrounded, cornered even, by patrons who weren't art collectors, but investors. Men in silk ties, women in socialite gowns. None of them knew its story. And Celine? She stood in front of it like it was hers. Ilara moved through the crowd, offering tight smiles and soft nods. She heard murmurs. Cassian's wife did all this? She's got taste. I'll give her that. Must be nice to have connections. No one mentioned her art school rejections. No one mentioned her years of painting in basements. They mentioned Cassian. They mentioned Celine. Near the drinks table, a critic named Joel Dayton from New York Aesthetic leaned toward Celine and whispered something that made her laugh. Sharp, throaty, dismissive. Then, just loud enough for Ilara to hear, he said, "Reminds me of my niece's college exhibit. Very emotional. Lacks discipline." Celine responded, "Well, we all need hobbies, don't we?" Ilara didn't react. Her fingers twitched, but she steadied them. Her father once told her, "Don't throw punches when you hold better tools." But right now, all her tools were on the wall, and they were being turned into ornaments instead of messages. At 6:23 p.m., Celine approached the sculpture directly. She placed one manicured finger on the steel edge. An assistant nearby rushed to warn her to step back. She waved him off. "No one's touching it," she said, tone flat. Ilara watched from across the room. Her stomach turned. This wasn't mischief. It was a chess move. 10 minutes later, she heard someone murmur behind her. Apparently, the whole show was bankrolled by her husband's firm. Yeah, she's more of a face than a name. Social favor, right? Not raw talent. Ilara turned. Two women stood sipping wine. Neither noticed her. But Celine had. She met Ilara's eyes from across the room and smiled. A slow, knowing smile. This wasn't sabotage with fists. It was death by reputation, strategic social warfare. And Cassian? Still not there. At 6:55 p.m., the lights dimmed slightly. Guests turned toward the west wall. The moment was planned, a subtle transition to draw attention to Gravity of Silence. This was Ilara's chance to speak, to welcome the crowd, to explain the inspiration behind her work. But just as she stepped toward the microphone, there was a commotion, a crash, a gasp, then silence. Gravity of Silence lay shattered across the marble floor. Bronze, clay, wire, fractured and ruined. One of Celine's assistants stood nearby, looking horrified. I slipped," she stammered. "I'm so sorry. The platform wasn't stable." But Ilara wasn't looking at her. She was looking at Celine, who had already turned away. Calm, collected, too calm. The assistant's smirk, just before she bent to pick up a shard, told Ilara everything. This was staged. A few people offered apologies. Someone offered a refund. One guest said, "It's all right. It wasn't your strongest piece anyway." Ilara didn't respond. She walked slowly over to what remained of her sculpture. She didn't kneel, didn't cry. She simply stood there until the murmurs died down. Cassian walked in at 7:42 p.m., loosening his tie. He scanned the room, confused by the mood shift. When he found Ilara, he smiled and leaned in to kiss her cheek. "Sorry. Traffic was a mess." She didn't speak. He looked down at the shattered sculpture. "What happened here?" She turned slowly to face him, and in that moment, under gallery lights, surrounded by strangers, critics, and a million unspoken words, she realized something. She didn't need Celine's approval. She needed Cassian's protection, and he had never given it. He looked at her again, waiting for an answer. She said nothing. He tried again. "It's okay. It's just one piece." That was when she blinked. Once, twice, and smiled. But it wasn't kindness. It was resignation. No. It wasn't just one piece. It was the last thread tying her to hope. Ilara excused herself from the crowd. She didn't storm out. She walked, shoulders straight, face blank. Behind her, applause began as someone clinked a glass. People thought it was part of the show. It wasn't. At 3:12 a.m., the gallery was dark. Ilara stood alone, picking up fragments of her sculpture. She placed them gently in a box. Like pieces of herself, she wasn't ready to throw away. She didn't text Cassian. She didn't check social media. She didn't reply to the press requests in her inbox. She just packed her brushes, her folder, her tools, and left. The next morning, she stood by the stove making tea. Cassian came in, still half asleep. "You disappeared last night," he said. "I was there," she replied. Celine said it was a strong showing. Aside from the incident, Ilara didn't answer. He poured coffee, sat, then added, "She's harsh, but she's still my mother. Don't let her get under your skin." She stared at him for a long moment, then asked quietly, "Did you ever ask her to stop?" Cassian blinked, didn't answer, and Ilara realized she didn't need one. That night, they slept back to back. No words, no warmth, just breath between strangers. And for the first time in their marriage, Ilara made a decision in silence. She would not fight him. She would not fix them. She would fix herself. The following week, Ilara didn't paint. She didn't return calls. She didn't show up to any follow-up meetings the gallery board had arranged. She let the silence do the talking, and it spoke volumes. People called her elusive. The press said she was taking time to reflect. Some blogs called her a fragile creative soul, but none of them knew the truth. Ilara wasn't broken. She was backing out of the frame, quietly, deliberately. Cassian never brought up the shattered sculpture again. Celine never apologized. Instead, she sent over a magazine clipping 2 weeks later with a sticky note attached. "This is how a real debut looks. Look at the lighting." SS Ilara folded the note and dropped it in the sink. Didn't even bother setting it on fire. It didn't deserve the drama. By the third week, Ilara had rented a storage unit under her maiden name. Not because she was hiding, because she needed a space that wasn't touched by Cassian's influence. She told him she was clearing out old canvases. He nodded. Didn't ask where. Didn't offer to help. Didn't even look up from his tablet. She wondered if he had always been like this, or if she had loved him so deeply that she'd only seen what she wanted to see. Celine, on the other hand, was flourishing. She attended 2 galas in a single weekend. She was featured in Gallery Monthly as a pillar of modern art patronage. She even gave an interview where she said, Young artists today need guidance. They lack direction without proper mentorship. Elara didn't respond publicly. She didn't need to. She knew now what Celine couldn't stand: being ignored. 3 weeks after the gallery incident, Cassian came home with takeout and an expensive bottle of wine. He placed it on the table like an offering. "I figured you might want to celebrate. The Fraser Gallery director said your name came up in conversation. They're watching you." Elara tilted her head. "Because of the exhibit? Because of your name," he said, smiling. "They said it's circulating. Your name." He didn't mean Elara Wynne. He meant Mrs. Sylvester. She nodded politely. But inside, something snapped. That night, while he slept, she packed 3 canvases, a box of tools, and her old sketchbooks. She took a cab across the city and unlocked the small studio she'd found tucked above a forgotten hardware store in Harlem. The ceilings were low. The windows fogged. The pipes ticked like a heartbeat. And it was perfect. The next morning, Cassian asked if she was feeling better. She said yes. He didn't notice the bags under her eyes or the paint on her knuckles. He was too busy reading financial briefs. He didn't ask what she'd been working on. He thought she had stopped, and she let him believe that. In her Harlem studio, she painted with the kind of hunger that doesn't need applause. No social media, no exhibitions, no curators breathing down her neck, no Celine watching with polished disdain. Just paint and sweat and freedom. She slept on the studio couch some nights, ate sandwiches from the bodega downstairs, scratched notes onto her walls like prayers. Cassian noticed a shift eventually. "You've been going out more," he said one evening. "I have things to work on." "Like what?" She smiled. "Storage." He didn't question it. He never did. That was the thing about their marriage. It wasn't built on cruelty or chaos. It was built on convenience. He liked her when she was quiet. He loved her most when she didn't need much. And the moment she began reclaiming space, he mistook it for routine. In that Harlem studio, Elara began to dream again. But this time, not about approval, or galleries, or glittering openings. She dreamt about being untouchable. Not out of arrogance, out of survival. She mailed 5 new pieces, unsigned, unbranded, to a mid-tier curator in Madrid. No biography, no social handles, no marital connections, just the work. She used a new name, her grandmother's. 3 weeks later, she got a reply. "There's something raw in these. We're interested in showcasing all 5. Cassian was watching TV when she read the email. He looked over and said, "Everything good?" Elara said, "Yeah, just old contacts checking in." He nodded, attention already drifting. He never asked for details, and she didn't offer. Celine, meanwhile, continued to insert herself into public art spaces. She curated a new exhibit themed resilience. Irony. She named herself honorary chair of the Women in Vision Gala. Elara saw her photo on the event flyer, draped in diamonds and self-importance. She turned the page and didn't flinch. This was no longer a war. Wars require 2 sides. Elara had left the battlefield. She was building something Celine couldn't touch because Celine didn't know it existed. And Cassian, he thought silence meant everything was fine. But in truth, silence was how Elara sharpened her edge. 2 months after the Madrid show, her pieces sold out. Quietly, anonymously. 3 private buyers. $280,000. No headlines. No interviews. Just a wire transfer into an account Cassian didn't know about. That night, he kissed her forehead and said, "You're glowing lately." She smiled. It wasn't from him. It wasn't from anything he'd done. It was from what she was becoming without him. Elara never made an announcement, never posted a victory, never tweeted a quote. She didn't need to. When you've been erased from the narrative, you write your own pages in private and let the headlines catch up when you're done. 3 weeks after her Madrid success, a collector from Dubai reached out. He didn't know her face. He only knew the work. He asked if she was open to a private commission. She accepted, but under her new alias. No photos, no credits, No husband's name attached. She poured herself into the piece, layered textures, delicate knife cuts, embedded threads of linen and ash. It took 6 weeks, 5 back spasms, and more silence than most people could tolerate. But when she was done, she stared at it and whispered, This is the version of me they never saw." Cassian was barely home by then. New board responsibilities, endless meetings. They passed each other like neighbors, polite, distant, meaningless. He didn't notice the boxes she moved into their storage closet. Didn't notice when she stopped wearing her ring in the studio. Didn't notice the way she stopped using we in conversation. Celine, meanwhile, continued her rise, now being referred to as a living institution in art philanthropy. The press fawned over her influence. She gave an interview with Metro Art Digest and said, "Inspiration is one thing, but it must be curated through experience. Unshaped talent is dangerous." It wasn't subtle, but Ilara didn't flinch. She didn't send a rebuttal, didn't correct the narrative, didn't even mention it to Cassian. Let Celine have her voice. Ilara had her canvas. At the Harlem studio, she painted every morning before the city stirred. Windows fogged, hair tied up, music low, and her heart steady. She no longer sought peace from her marriage. She found it in her purpose. An emerging French curator named Brigitte Roux stumbled upon Ilara's work while attending the Madrid showcase. She didn't know Ilara's real name, but she sent a direct message to the artist account. "There is something defiant and beautiful in your restraint. We'd like to show you in Paris." Ilara didn't respond right away. She stared at the screen for 20 minutes, then whispered to herself, "Not yet." She'd learned her lesson. Momentum was like fire, beautiful but dangerous when rushed. She let it burn slowly. 3 months later, she agreed. But only under 3 conditions. Cassian noticed she was gone for 5 days in the fall. "Work trip?" he asked. Something like that. He didn't ask where, didn't ask if she needed anything. She returned with a tan, a quiet smile, and 3 new commission requests waiting in her inbox. The Paris exhibit was a success. Quiet, but undeniable. She sold out in 48 hours. Half the pieces purchased by clients who had never heard of her name, but couldn't forget the feeling her work left behind. A local critic wrote, "These pieces feel like they were born from silence and sharpened by restraint. Whoever this artist is, they've already won." Ilara didn't celebrate. She worked. She walked the Seine alone and ate dinner on rooftops where no one recognized her. She breathed. For the first time in years, she wasn't Cassian's wife, wasn't Celine's project, wasn't anyone's reflection. She was her own. Meanwhile, back home, Cassian's firm was preparing for a merger. He was distracted, always on the phone, always managing chaos. He told her they might need to move offices, maybe even cities. She nodded and said, "Let me know what you decide." He didn't catch the wording, didn't catch the distance. Celine sent an invite to her annual Women in Vision benefit. Front row seats, name printed in gold. Ilara declined. No explanation, just a quiet absence. That absence said more than any please reply. The next time Celine reached out, it wasn't through a card or assistant. It was a phone call. Ilara almost didn't answer, but curiosity and closure had a way of pulling strings. "Hello." "Ilara." Celine's voice was flat. "We haven't spoken." Ilara didn't fill the silence. Celine cleared her throat. "I saw the article. The Paris one." "Of course she did." "Congratulations," Celine said. "You've made your point." Ilara closed her eyes. The gall of that sentence. "I wasn't making a point," she said calmly. "Oh, come on, let's not pretend." "I wasn't proving anything to you," Ilara cut in. "You were never the goal." There was a pause. "Let's move on," Celine said at last. "We're family after all." Ilara's voice didn't rise, but it didn't bend either. "You no longer exist in my world." Then she hung up. The weight didn't fall off her shoulders. It evaporated. Back in Harlem, she picked up a blank canvas and smiled. The envelope arrived in late winter. No handwriting. No letterhead, just her name, in clean type. Inside was an invitation, private opening, Westbrook Modern, Upper Manhattan. Date, March 14th. Curator, Brigitte Roux. Title of the show, Held Breath. No one knew the artist's name. The promotional banners only showed a signature mark in charcoal, a curved shape like a birdwing in motion. But Ilara knew the space. It was prestigious, influential, elite. It was also the same museum Celine once chaired. She said yes. And this time, she didn't hide behind an alias. She didn't use her full name either. She simply told them to list her as Win. Let them wonder. Let the art speak. She handpicked the invite list. No press releases, no public announcement, only 40 guests. Cassian received an envelope. So did two of Celine's former allies in the gallery world. Celine herself. Nothing. Cassian showed up 20 minutes late, as always, but Ilara didn't wait by the door. She stood near the centerpiece, a massive canvas layered with threads, linen, and oil. A piece titled, The Last Sound She Heard. It was full of movement, but anchored in stillness. Cassian spotted her, and for a moment, the noise in the room disappeared. He walked over, slower than usual. He looked different, a little more worn, a little less sure. Ilara, he said quietly. This is... His voice trailed off. She waited. Beautiful. She nodded. Thank you. They didn't hug. They didn't kiss. They stood in silence for a moment that carried all the weight of years lost to misalignment. Later that evening, he approached her again. Guests had filtered out. The room had dimmed. Only the soft hum of light jazz remained. Do you still think about that night? He asked. The gallery. My mother. All of it. Ilara turned slightly, eyes soft. Yes and no. He looked confused. She explained, it broke me, but it also rebuilt me, and I like who I've become more than who I was. Cassian stepped closer. I didn't know how much I failed you, until you stopped needing me. She looked him in the eyes. I didn't stop needing love. I stopped needing your version of it. They walked outside together. Snow was falling, soft and slow. He offered her his coat. She shook her head. I'm warm. They didn't talk about reconciliation. They didn't talk about endings. They just stood there, two people who shared a past, but no longer shared a path. Weeks later, the story of Win spread. Collectors wanted more. Critics praised her restraint, her emotional intelligence, her quiet mastery. She read the headlines, saw the exhibitions, heard the whispers, then disappeared. Not physically, but socially. A quiet investigation began into her handling of gallery funds. Private donors stepped away. A silent scandal. Ilara never commented. She didn't need to. Instead, she launched a foundation, the Win Collective, focused on funding underrepresented artists, especially those who had been silenced, dismissed, or reduced to someone else's plus one. She mentored quietly, funded anonymously, created endlessly. One reporter managed to catch her after a small exhibit in Lisbon. He asked, "What drives your work now?" She smiled. Stillness and memory. "Do you ever think of your beginnings?" "All the time," she replied. "But I'm more interested in where I'm headed." Ilara Win was no longer someone's wife. She was someone's hope. To artists, to women, to the version of herself she nearly abandoned. Ilara Win had once walked behind velvet curtains and held her breath. Now, people waited for her to exhale. The Paris show was only the beginning. What followed wasn't loud, wasn't viral. It was precision. Her collectors didn't clamor, they queued. Her buyers didn't bargain, they listened. She hadn't set out to become elusive, but in her silence, the world had grown hungry for her. Her second exhibit launched in Milan. Title, Forgiveness Without Applause. It sold out in one day. A single canvas, what survival feels like in stillness, was purchased for $450,000 by a private collector from Zurich. He didn't ask about the backstory. He simply said, "This feels like someone who survived the fire and chose not to speak of the burns." Ilara smiled gently and left the room. Back home, she rented a small loft in Brooklyn, quiet, sunlit, far from the penthouse life Cassian once promised. She painted early mornings, mentored afternoons, taught free classes once a week at a youth center where no one cared about gallery names. And at night, she walked, not to get somewhere. Cassian reached out once after the Westbrook Modern show. A short email. "Dinner? Just to talk. No expectations." She replied, "Thank you, but I've already said everything I needed to, by becoming someone you never thought I could be without you." He didn't reply. She didn't expect him to. The Wynn Collective began as a whisper. Just 3 grants, quietly awarded. No PR, but word spread. By year's end, the foundation had funded 17 emerging artists, all women. All with stories that didn't fit neatly into gallery bios. One had been homeless. Another was deaf. One was 63 and had never shown her work to anyone but her grandchild. Ilara didn't seek credit. She only asked that each recipient sign their piece with full confidence. No initials, no aliases. "Your name is your legacy," she told them. "Say it without flinching." One morning, a letter arrived from an 11-year-old girl in Kansas. She wrote, "Dear Ms. Wynn, I saw your painting online at the museum. I'm not good at drawing, but I feel things when I try. My mom said artists have to be loud to get seen. But your work was quiet and people still came. Can I still be an artist if I stay soft?" Ilara cried. Not loud, not long. But it was the first tear she'd shed in years. She mailed the girl a hand-painted card and wrote, "Soft is powerful. Stay exactly how you are." Celine had disappeared from headlines. After the quiet investigation, most of her speaking engagements dried up. She wasn't arrested. She wasn't shamed publicly. But she was ignored, which, for a woman like her, was worse. No one returned her calls. Her opinions stopped being quoted. And the art world, with its rotating faces and seasonal allegiances, had already found its new muse. One whose name needed no introduction. Ilara never gloated. Revenge didn't live in her heart, only clarity. She was invited to a live interview in Berlin for an international arts symposium. They offered press coverage, profile features, even a documentary. She declined. Instead, she sent a recorded message. "My story doesn't need to be told in headlines. It already lives in the hands of every woman who was ever silenced and still chose to create." A few months later, Ilara's 3rd solo exhibit opened in Tokyo. Title, Quiet Justice. She stood in a simple black dress, hair pulled back, no diamonds, no handlers. The gallery was packed. At one point, a woman approached her and said, "I don't know who you are. I don't know your backstory. But when I stood in front of that canvas, it felt like my mother forgave me." Ilara didn't know what to say. She only held the woman's hands and whispered, "Then I'm glad I showed up." That was Ilara now, a woman who didn't shout to be heard, a woman who turned pain into permission for others to rise. She never hired a publicist, never chased features, never bought into branding. Yet the name Wynn began appearing on invitation-only panels in Amsterdam, collector wish lists in Dubai, and private art libraries across Scandinavia. She was what every artist secretly wanted to be, unreachable, yet unforgettable. Her pieces no longer came with bios. She let silence fill the gaps. Sometimes, a single phrase accompanied the canvas, for the ones who stayed soft. "Built from what you broke. I survived by not explaining." Buyers flew across oceans to stand in front of her work, not because it shouted at them, but because it didn't need to. Her 4th exhibit in Copenhagen was titled Inheritance. One critic wrote, "This is not art that demands, it listens, and then it haunts you for days." Cassian saw the reviews. He heard about the sold-out shows. A mutual friend told him, "You know she's everywhere now, right? Even my wife won't shut up about Wynn." Cassian smiled politely, but inside, he felt something he hadn't in years: regret. Not because he missed the fame attached to her name, but because he'd watched a rare, powerful woman dim her own light to fit into his world, and now she was outshining it. Ilara didn't block him, but she didn't reach out either. They were still legally married, separated quietly, emotionally done. She never rushed the paperwork. She didn't need a court to tell her she was free. Celine had faded into social silence. No more panels, no more power plays. Her allies had moved on, and the ones she tried to cling to politely changed the subject whenever Ilara's name came up. No scandal, no disgrace, just irrelevance. And that, for Celine, was a sentence worse than shame. Ilara spent her 33rd birthday on a rooftop in Florence, alone, barefoot, with paint on her fingers. She had no cake, no calls, just a new canvas, and a note to herself: "You are not owed applause for surviving, but you are allowed to make noise after." The Quiet Justice series was turned into a limited edition coffee table book. Proceeds funded 10 full-ride art scholarships under the Wynne Foundation. She refused to let the publisher add her photo or include interviews. "This isn't about me," she told them. "It's about the girls who haven't found their names yet." At a panel in Seoul, a fellow artist asked her, "Don't you ever feel like screaming after everything?" Ilara smiled. "I did. But then I learned that silence isn't surrender, it's strategy." Not long after, she received an invite to keynote at a global women's summit. The theme, voice. She declined the keynote slot, but she agreed to paint a live piece during the closing ceremony. No speech, no spotlight, just brush and canvas. On stage, in front of 3,000 women, she created a textured portrait of a faceless woman standing barefoot with arms raised, palms open, mouth closed, but eyes burning. The crowd stood for 10 minutes after she finished. She didn't bow. She didn't wave. She stepped down and disappeared backstage without saying a single word. That was her rhythm now. Enter quietly, leave powerfully. She never gave her story away. Not in podcasts, not in documentaries, not in biographies. What people knew was enough. She had married power, been dismissed, silenced, sabotaged, and then she returned, not to win revenge, but to build something no one could take. She wasn't someone's success story. She was a warning to anyone who ever looked at a quiet girl and thought she wouldn't rise. 3 years. That's how long it had been since Ilara had last shown her work in New York. 3 years since the night her sculpture was shattered. Since whispers replaced praise. Since Celine called her a sweet hobbyist to a room full of people with platforms. And now, she was coming back. But this time, not to prove anything. This time, she came to claim space. The invitation came from the Westview Art Institute, a private request from the director himself, not mass-emailed, not filtered through agents. His message was simple: "Your absence has been louder than most voices in our industry. We'd be honored to hold your silence in our walls." She replied with 2 conditions. 1. No press until opening night. 2. No seats reserved for Cassian or Celine. He agreed instantly. The title of the exhibit, Memory Without Permission. She rented a brownstone for 2 weeks. Same neighborhood where she used to walk past overpriced cafes and wonder if anyone would ever say her name without attaching it to his. The morning she arrived, she passed a billboard on Madison that read, "The Return of Wynne." She didn't pause. She already knew who she was. The city was the one that had to catch up. Back at Westview, her team, small, loyal, and fiercely protective, set up the space exactly as she wanted. No red carpets, no press pit, no family section, just art and air. And enough quiet for her pieces to be heard without explanation. Cassian reached out through a mutual acquaintance, 2 days before opening night. Would she be open to a conversation? He asked. The reply was short. She's not here for conversations. She's here for closure. Celine never reached out. But someone told Ilara she had RSVP'd to a gala the same night, across the city. No coincidence, no surprise. Opening night arrived. Guests entered in small waves. The exhibit had no titles on the walls. Only QR codes, which, when scanned, showed handwritten reflections Ilara had written, some only 5 words long. This is what enough feels like. Not all silence is surrender. I watched them talk. I built instead. People stood for long minutes in front of each canvas. No one rushed. No one posed. A woman in her 60s whispered to a friend, "I haven't felt art in my bones since my divorce." A man took off his glasses and wiped his face. This one, it's like I lost her all over again. Ilara stayed in the shadows for most of the evening. She didn't need to be seen. She needed her work to speak. And it did. In every breath held, every jaw clenched, every tear blinked away without shame. Toward the end of the night, the director approached her. "We've never had a room so full of stillness," he said. Not silence, stillness. Like everyone knew they had to listen. Ilara nodded. "That's all I ever wanted." As guests trickled out, one of the staff handed her a card. No name, just a note. "You showed me how to survive by walking away. Thank you for not teaching with rage. Thank you for showing me grace." She folded the card and tucked it into her coat. Didn't try to guess who wrote it. It could have been anyone. That was the point. Later that night, she walked through the space alone. No shoes, no noise. Just her and the pieces. Her fingers traced the edge of one canvas. No apologies left. She smiled. She had painted that one with nothing but water, ash, and memory. She wasn't coming back to this city, not for a while. But she didn't need to. She'd left her imprint in every corner of that room. And when she walked out into the cold air that night, she wasn't escaping. She was choosing. The next morning, Ilara returned to Westview before sunrise. She wanted to see the space empty again, the way it had looked before the world entered. She walked barefoot across the gallery floor, each step echoing softly against white walls and layered light. The paintings looked different in the stillness, braver, quieter, more certain, so much like her. The janitor, an older man with silver hair and headphones in, looked up from mopping. "You her?" he asked, pulling one earbud out. She tilted her head. "Depends who her is." He grinned. The one everyone kept staring at, like they were seeing their own secrets. She smiled. "I guess I am." He nodded slowly. "You ain't loud," he said, "but you shook the room." Then he got back to work. Ilara just stood there for a moment, deeply still, her fingers trailing across the frame of thread. Between us, a piece she had reworked from the very first painting Cassian ever saw at the cafe. Only now, it held none of him, just her evolution. Later that day, calls poured in. Not from Cassian, not from Celine, from curators, collectors, museums across continents. One from Sao Paulo, another from Cape Town. A private university wanted to build a lecture series around her process. A documentary crew asked for access. She declined most of them. Her assistant asked why. Ilara said simply, "I'm not a product. I'm a permission." One call did surprise her. It came from a woman named Amaya, one of the artists she had anonymously funded through the Win Collective 2 years earlier. Her voice shook with emotion. "I didn't know you were you," she said. "I just wanted to say, thank you. I have my first solo show next month. I never thought that would happen. I would have quit without the grant." Ilara felt her throat tighten. "You didn't need me," she said. "You needed space." Amaya replied, "That's the thing. You gave me both." Meanwhile, Celine's name continued to fade from relevance. She appeared once in a regional magazine interview about legacy and was quoted saying, "Art today lacks tradition. Everyone wants to be personal, vulnerable. It's getting messy." The reporter didn't follow up. The piece didn't trend. Her world was growing quieter. Not in the empowering way Ilara had built for herself, but in the way that erodes power, gently and permanently. Cassian's company completed its merger. He was no longer CEO. His title changed. His role reduced. He kept the penthouse, but not the reputation. When asked about Ilara in a rare interview, he only said, I underestimated her silence, and I paid for it. Back at the brownstone, Ilara began working on her next series. No theme yet, just colors. Bold, free, no restraint. For the first time, she wasn't painting from pain. She was painting from peace. The Westview director sent her a message that week. "We'd like to feature one of your pieces as a permanent installation." She agreed. But she didn't give them one from the show. She painted something new, simple, just a single color field, black layered with gray and gold underpaint. The title, she left without apologizing. It hung near the front of the building 3 weeks later. Visitors stopped, took photos, read the plaque. Some smiled, some stood still, some cried, but none of them walked past it unmoved. A year later, the gallery would report a 40% increase in female solo exhibits. A ripple, started by one woman, who refused to shrink for legacy, who built her own. Ilara never called it revenge. She called it balance. A message came in on a Wednesday. Subject line, win, nomination confirmed. International Arts Council, Zurich. Ilara stared at the email for nearly 5 full minutes. She hadn't applied, hadn't asked, didn't even know she was in the running, but someone had submitted her name. Quietly, powerfully. The seat on the Zurich Council was prestigious, an advisory board that shaped global art conversations, decided funding for cultural museums, and mentored emerging voices around the world. Her assistant buzzed into her home studio a minute later. "I saw the news," she said breathlessly. "Do we accept?" Ilara's fingers hovered over the trackpad. She finally said, "Let's wait 24 hours. That night, she poured herself tea and stepped out onto the small balcony of her Brooklyn loft. The city buzzed below. She didn't need its noise anymore. She'd made peace with being a quiet center in a loud world. Still, this wasn't about vanity. It was about influence, about creating space for others, something she wished someone had done for her. By sunrise, she sent a single-word reply, "Yes." 3 weeks later, she flew to Zurich. The council welcomed her with reverence and restraint. She was introduced not as Mrs. Sylvester, not even as Ilara Wynne, simply as Wynne. Her presence caused murmurs, even admiration, but not intimidation. She didn't carry ego into the room, just experience, and a memory sharpened by years of being dismissed. On her second day, a proposal was raised to evaluate candidates for an emerging artist grant in North America. Ilara volunteered to review the submissions. Later that night, she opened the digital folder. She scanned bios, browsed portfolios, then froze. Submission 9th. Artist, Kira Hale. Medium, mixed textures, soft color palette, handwritten overlays. Representation agency, Silcrest Creative Management. Lead mentor, Celine Sylvester. Ilara sat back. Her fingers didn't move. Her heart didn't race, but her mind was very, very still. She opened the portfolio anyway. Kira's work was good, really good. It was raw but intentional, soft but assertive. But in her artist's statement, one line echoed like a trap. Mentorship is the key to visibility. Celine Sylvester saw potential in me when no one else did. Ilara stood up, walked to her window, and stared out into the dark. She wasn't angry. She was calculating. Celine hadn't disappeared, after all. She'd simply found a new way back in, through someone else's talent, someone else's innocence. The next morning, Ilara addressed the council. She requested that all mentor affiliations be reviewed for ethics compliance. It was approved without objection. No names were called out. No alarms. Just systems being quietly corrected. Later, Ilara asked to meet Kira. Privately, off record. They sat in a quiet Zurich cafe near the river. Kira looked nervous but eager. You're Wynne, she said, voice full of awe. Ilara nodded, smiling gently. I read your work, she said. You don't need anyone's name tied to your brush. Kira blinked. But Celine, she's opened doors I didn't know existed. Elara sipped her tea, then leaned in. She opened them for herself. "You're the one walking through." Kira's face fell. "But I don't have a safety net without her." Elara reached into her bag and handed her a card. It had no title, no number, just a date and an address. "The next WIN collective intake starts in April. If you apply, without her name, you'll be judged by your work alone." Kira stared at the card like it might burn her fingers. "Would you really support me?" she asked. Elara met her eyes. "I don't rescue people. I give them what I never had." That night, Elara wrote her resignation letter from the Zurich Council. She didn't need a seat at a table where she'd already planted roots elsewhere. She was never meant to sit inside power structures. She was meant to create new ones. The press never heard about the Celine connection. Kira applied to the WIN collective 2 months later and was accepted. Celine reached out once after that. A short, clipped email. "You always were dramatic, Elara." Elara didn't respond. She archived the message, then blocked the address. Some people think closure is a conversation. For Elara, it was a decision. To no longer flinch, to no longer explain, to no longer carry people who once held scissors to her spine. It started with a simple text. "Cassian, are you still in the city?" Elara stared at it for a full minute, then typed back, "Yes." 2 more messages followed. "Cassian, dinner, 1 hour. No agenda. Just me. I'll come to you." She hesitated, then replied, "Okay, 8 p.m. The corner cafe on Ashbury." She arrived early, wore all black, hair up, no makeup except for a subtle line over her lashes. She didn't dress for intimidation. She dressed for peace. Cassian walked in at 8:03. Still handsome, still composed, but smaller now, less sure. His confidence was softer, not performative, not sharp, just tired. He smiled. She nodded. They didn't hug. He sat across from her and waited for the server to walk away before speaking. "I've been meaning to do this for a while," he said. "I know." He looked around the cafe. "You used to bring your sketchbooks here." "I still do," she replied, "but now I fill them without hiding." He nodded. "You've become—" She held his gaze. "Myself." There was silence. Not uncomfortable, just clean. Cassian cleared his throat. "I saw your Zurich Council speech. I didn't give one. You didn't have to. The press wrote it for you." She smiled slightly. "That's not my voice." He leaned forward. "But your silence said enough." Their food arrived. Neither touched it at first. Cassian rubbed his thumb against the side of the water glass. "I think about that night often," he said quietly. "The gallery, my mother, the sculpture." "I don't," Elara said simply. "Not anymore." That stunned him. "You don't relive it." "I rewrote it." He looked confused. She continued. "I stopped asking why it happened. I started asking what I was supposed to build after it did." "And did you?" he asked, more curious than defensive. She nodded. "Yes." Cassian leaned back. "You didn't just leave me, Elara. You left quietly. I didn't even notice until you weren't there anymore." She sipped her tea. "That was the problem, Cassian. I was never fully seen, just placed, decorated, framed." He swallowed hard. "I was proud of you. I told people—" "You told people I had potential," she cut in. "Not that I had power." Another pause. He finally said what he'd come to say. "I'm sorry." Not dramatic, not teary, just honest. Elara didn't dismiss it, but she didn't cradle it either. She let it land where it landed, then replied, "Thank you. But I already gave myself the apology years ago." He looked down. When he looked back up, his expression had changed, gentler, resolved. "So, what now?" Elara tilted her head. "For me?" He nodded. She smiled softly. "I'm going to finish a painting in the morning, read a letter from a girl in Argentina who saw my Tokyo exhibit. Then I'm going to walk to the studio and keep making work that makes women feel like they belong in their own lives." He didn't ask, "What about me?" Didn't ask, "Is there a chance?" Because the answer was already written in the calm of her voice. This was goodbye. Pulled cash from his wallet and placed it gently under the ceramic plate. "I'm proud of who you became," he said. "I'm proud of who I freed," she replied. He left. She stayed. The server came by and asked if she needed anything else. She said yes. Another cup of tea and a napkin. She pulled out a pen and began sketching a single line across the napkin. A spiral uncoiling, slow but steady, free from the center out. The title she wrote at the top: Quiet Exit. The idea came one morning while she was watering the tiny fern by her window. No press, no grant proposals, no gala fundraisers, just a quiet urge that tugged at her chest. What if the next generation of artists never had to wait for permission? Elara didn't want another exhibit. She wanted a space, a permanent one, not curated by critics, not owned by patrons, not run by people with old money and older thinking. A home for women's stories, but without names on the walls, without bios at the door, without expectations to perform. Just a blank space with light and quiet, where art could exist unpolished, unfinished, unfiltered. She called it the studio. No branding, no PR blitz, just a tiny brick building tucked into a back street in Bed-Stuy. She bought it in cash, refurbished it in silence, painted the inside herself with whitewashed walls, floating beams, and wide windows. The only thing she kept from her past was a single bronze plate near the entrance that read, "Your story matters. Leave it here." The studio wasn't open to the public, only to artists. There was no front desk, no tours, no marketing, but word spread, and within a month, submissions trickled in. Not through formal applications, but through letters, handwritten, typed, some with coffee stains, some with fingerprints of paint, stories of women trying to reclaim time, space, voice. Elara didn't pick artists based on technical skill. She picked them based on what their work needed. If it needed light, she gave them a window. If it needed warmth, she gave them a couch and a heater. If it needed time, she gave them a key and no deadline. Some stayed for a week, others for 3 months. None of their names were ever listed on the door, but their art filled the walls, new every month, raw, real, not always pretty, but always true. One afternoon, a young artist named Mari handed Elara a sketch. It was a self-portrait, but half her face was missing. "I keep erasing this side," she confessed. "I don't know how to draw it without lying." Elara took the paper, then handed it back. "You don't have to draw what you haven't healed. Start with what's still whole." Mari broke down in tears. This was the studio. Not therapy, not fame, just space. Safe, warm, unjudged. One night, a former gallery owner tried to visit. He buzzed the side door, said he wanted to talk to Miss Wynne. Elara watched from the top window and never came down. The building wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to whoever needed it next. Back at her loft, Elara finally boxed up her wedding ring. It wasn't bitterness, just time. She placed it inside a clay bowl with no lid, no ceremony, no tears. She simply said, "Thank you for the version of me I grew out of." She spent her days quietly reviewing submissions and her nights painting things she would never sell. She gave away more than she kept, not just money, but belief. Because belief, once planted in the right hands, grows louder than any gallery opening ever could. She turned down a Lifetime Achievement Award that spring, wrote a letter back. "I don't need to be awarded for surviving. Let the girls coming next get the spotlight. I've had my turn." By now, the art world whispered about her like a myth. Some said she had retired. Some said she'd disappeared. But the women who painted on the 3rd floor of that little brick building, they knew. Wynne hadn't vanished. She'd multiplied. It was a warm, cloudless morning when the letter arrived. No return address, no branding, just a slim envelope, hand-delivered to the studio's side door. "Mari, The young artist who once cried over an erased face brought it upstairs. "I think this is for you," she said softly. Alara took it and nodded. Inside was a folded sheet of textured paper. No dramatic message, no fanfare, just 5 words in neat black ink. "You gave us a door." Attached was a photograph, grainy, taken with a phone. In it, a group of teenage girls stood outside a warehouse in Detroit, smiling, paint on their jeans, brushes in their hands. Behind them, a banner read, "The New Studio," and beneath it, spray-painted in charcoal grey, inspired by Wynne. Alara didn't cry. She didn't speak. She walked downstairs, sat in the open archway near the main window, and stared at the street. For hours. Just breathing. Just feeling. Legacy, she realized, doesn't ask for applause. It asks for multiplication. For the kind of change that doesn't credit you by name, but echoes your intentions, again and again. That night, she added something new to the bronze plate outside the studio. Beneath the original engraving, "Your story matters. Leave it here." She had a second line etched. "Then go make room for someone else." Over the next few years, small studios began appearing across the country. No franchises, no promotions, just quiet spaces with open doors. Some had her name whispered inside them. Others didn't. She didn't care. She never trademarked the idea, because freedom isn't something you own. It's something you give away. Cassian never reached out again. He married someone else. She saw it in a quiet news mention buried in the finance section. She didn't feel anything when she read it. Just closed the article and went back to her painting. Celine was last seen attending a local community fundraiser. No cameras, no interviews. The industry had long since moved on. No scandal. Just silence. Fitting. Alara turned 40 in the spring. There was no party. She opened the studio that morning like any other day, watered the plant by the window, brewed tea, and welcomed in a new artist named Dahlia. 19, nervous, barefoot. "I'm not sure I belong here," Dahlia said, arms crossed. Alara smiled. "That's exactly how you know you do." Later that evening, Alara stood alone inside the main gallery room, surrounded by art she didn't make but felt deeply responsible for. She looked at each piece, every canvas, every crack in the wall, every brushstroke left behind by a woman reclaiming herself, and whispered, "This was always the masterpiece, not the awards, not the magazine spreads, not even her own paintings, but this, the permission, the protection, the place." Years from now, they'd write about her in essays. Young women would reference her in classrooms. Critics would try to define her work in words it was never meant to wear. But the ones who would carry her story best were the ones whose names were never published, only painted. Because quiet justice doesn't end, it multiplies, until it becomes a chorus so strong no one can ignore it. And that was all she ever wanted. Sometimes the loudest victory doesn't come with noise. It comes with peace. Alara didn't fight with fists. She didn't scream to be heard. She simply chose to rise her way in her time. Now ask yourself, have you ever been underestimated, pushed aside, told you weren't enough simply because someone didn't see your worth? If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own quiet battles, take a moment to leave a comment below. Tell us, what moment made you pause? What part of Alara's journey felt personal to you? And don't forget, your story matters too. So if you're still in your gallery night, if you're standing in front of a broken sculpture in your own life, don't quit. Start again, in silence if you must, but start. Tap that like button to show us you're still building. Share this video with someone who needs quiet strength today, and hit subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us pain doesn't end us, it refines us. This is Mr. Charles Stories. Real voices, real lessons, real power. I'll see you in the next one.